Good morning and welcome to Tricky Financial Situations brought to you by NCSEAA. I am Katrina Lee. I'm the Director of Financial Aid at Wayne Community College, and I have been in financial aid for, oh my goodness, 19 years. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and jump right into this today. We'll move through the slides fairly quickly and try to leave some time for questions at the end. Okay, so Ronald grew up in Massachusetts with his biological mom, Barbara. In late 2021, she married Ronald's stepmother, Isabel. Barbara, Isabel, and Ronald have since relocated to North Carolina. And when Ronald completes his FAFSA in North Carolina, what parental information should he be required to include? Okay, since the parents were married, both Isabel and Barbara's information would be included on his FAFSA. This is as a result of the 2015 U.S. Supreme Court that ruled the same-sex couples have the fundamental right to marriage in all 50 states. So each of these is going to be a scenario. I think that this really helps out quite a bit, better than the way we used to do this at some of the in-person ones. We talked about what the rules were, but the scenarios I think will really help a lot. When Sophie completes her FAFSA, she discovers that her EFC is $3,200. She plans to attend Wake Forest University. What types of state aid is Sophie automatically eligible to receive, if any? If she changed her mind and decided to attend UNC Charlotte instead, what types of financial aid would she be eligible for, if any? If Sophie attends Wake Forest, she'll be eligible for the North Carolina Need-Based Scholarship, and that is for private institutions in North Carolina. If Sophie attends UNC Charlotte, she'll be eligible for the North Carolina Education Lottery Scholarship and the UNC Need-Based Grant. Neither of those are available to private institutions in North Carolina. The Education Lottery Scholarship is available at public institutions. The UNC Need-Based Grant is available for those attending the UNC system 4-year schools. And then there's another one, the Community College Grant, in case your child is attending a community college in North Carolina. Helen's parents have been legally married for over 20 years, but her father has lived in Turkey for the past 3 years and doesn't frequently have the opportunity to visit his family. As Helen is preparing to complete her FAFSA, she is unsure of what parental information to include or even how to obtain her father's financial information. She consults you, her high school counselor, and here is what you would tell her. Helen is required to include both parents' information since they are still legally married, despite the fact that her father lives in another country. Her father will need to use his foreign tax return or non-filing data along with his reportable asset information converted to US dollars. This type of question comes up a lot because there is a clause on the FAFSA about including a parent's information who is not in the home and other than a temporary absence. So in some situations, there may be a parent who's not in the home who doesn't count, but because they're still legally married, this one would still count. Yolanda is preparing to attend UNC Wilmington, and she is in the middle of completing her FAFSA when she stumbles upon a question she's not sure how to answer. The number in college. Being the youngest of 3 siblings, she already has one sister who is graduating and another one who's attending Meredith College. Yolanda's mom is also taking a full-time online course load at ECU. What number of family members should Yolanda indicate are attending college and why? Okay, so Yolanda should indicate that 2 individuals in the family are attending college, her and her older sister at Meredith. Even though her mom's enrolled in classes, Yolanda cannot include her. A lot of people often have questions about why they can't include their parent. And the way I kind of try to help them look at it is that, you know, in the eyes of the Department of Ed, it's the parent's responsibility to see to it that the child gets an education. Thus, the parent counts the student on their FAFSA, on the parent's FAFSA, but not vice versa. Since it's not the student's responsibility to see to it that the parent gets educated on the student FAFSA, it does not count. The parent does not count. Joel has lived with his grandmother and his father since he was 4 years old, mostly due to the fact that his mother left when he was 2, and his father was working 14-hour shifts. Eventually, Joel's father moved across the country to pursue a better job opportunity, and the decision was made for Joel to stay with his grandmother throughout high school. While Joel sees his father about once a year, his grandmother is the individual who financially supports and takes care of Joel. As he applies to college, Joel submits the FAFSA to several institutions with his grandmother's information listed under Parent 1. Will the institutions or the government accept this information? Why or why not? And no, if either of them are aware that this is the grandmother's information and not the father's information, they'll have to make the change to the father's information. Even though he lives with his grandmother in North Carolina, and his father is still the one who's legally responsible for him. He was not in a guardianship. He was not adopted. So it would be his father's information that would be on the FAFSA. Craig's mom and dad lived together in the same house in Raleigh, although they never legally married. Craig's mom provides over 50% of the support for him and claims him as an exemption on her tax return. Craig is preparing to submit the FAFSA to an NC state, and he includes both parents' financial information. Will North Carolina State and the government accept both parents' information? Why or why not? Yes. Okay, since it's his biological parents, even though they were never married, he would still be required to include financial information on both of them. Billy is a high school senior who has applied for FELS, F-E-L-S, for the upcoming school year. His career plan is to become a physician's assistant. Can he apply to FELS for the physician's assistance program for the upcoming year? Okay, FELS does not fund future degrees nor the tracks that lead up to them. Nursing is the only field of study that you can receive during an ADN to a doctorate level. Esperanza is a United States citizen, but her married parents moved here before she was born and are not legal residents of the country. Esperanza is completing the FAFSA for Appalachian State University, and she is stumped by the question regarding her parents. She wonders, can I include their information? Am I required to? What would it even look like if I needed to? As her high school counselor, what advice would you give her and why? Okay, and I know we get a lot of the students in this situation. So she is required to include her parents' financial information, even though they are not United States citizens and they're not eligible non-citizens. When she includes their information, she should include all zeros for their social security numbers. I will say that when she does this, it's going to tell her it's wrong and ask her, does she really want to enter that? So a lot of people stop there because they don't realize that they say, yes, I know it's wrong, keep going, so they can keep going. And at the end, it'll pop up again and tell you, hey, you need to verify that this is what you actually want to enter. We just need to go ahead and say, yes, this is what we actually want to enter. She must include any income and assets on the FAFSA, but she will not be able to use the IRS data retrieval tool since her parents will not, so she won't be able to use the IRS data retrieval tool. Her parents will also not be able to create a federal student aid ID, so they'll need to print the signature page and mail it in to the federal student aid, and here is that address. Additionally, she could send it to the school where she attends. Most of them will forward it on for her. If she's at a FAFSA event at a college, they'll go ahead and forward it on for her when they collect those signatures. She will most likely be selected for verification, but that shouldn't be a cause for concern. If you'd like to help her understand the verification process, you can reach out to Juana Hernandez, Spanish CFNC Regional Representative, at the email and phone number below. Gabriel is a U.S. citizen. His parents moved here before he was born. When Gabriel was 1 year old, his parents decided to move back to Colombia. When Gabriel was 16, he moved back to North Carolina with his aunt, whom he's been living with for the past several years. He has been living in North Carolina for 2 years, but his parents are still living in Colombia. His school counselor is wondering whether or not he should include parent information and how he would be able to complete the FAFSA. Is he still eligible to receive financial aid? That one I just really confused as I was reading that one. I apologize. Okay, so the first step would be to identify whether or not Gabriel is a dependent or an independent student. If Gabriel's not considered an independent student and he is still receiving financial support from his parents, then he would need to include his parents on the financial information, even if they're living in Colombia. When filling out the income asset information, they would need to convert the amounts to US dollars. He would be eligible to receive federal aid based on his EFC. If Gabriel cannot provide parental information, the student would need to select on the FAFSA that they were unable to provide parent information and speak with the college's financial aid office wherever he was applying. Okay, so his best scenario is going to be to include the financial information from his parents. If he doesn't provide the parental information and he still has contact with his parents, then it's going to really limit the aid that he's going to be eligible for. Marissa has been an unaccompanied youth, has been unaccompanied by a parent or guardian for the past 3 months, and she's been residing at various friends' houses. Her teachers and classmates at the local high school have no idea that she hasn't had a home to stay in. As she hasn't felt comfortable sharing this information with anyone, she now sits in your office as you help her complete the FAFSA. The information she shares catches you by surprise, and you are quickly attempting to determine her dependency status and the next steps to be completed. So here's what you explain. Marissa will be classified as an independent student, meaning she will not need to provide any parental information on the FAFSA. She will receive this classification because she is an unaccompanied homeless youth. The high school and/or district homeless liaison will work to verify the information that Marissa has shared, and Marissa will be able to answer yes to the question on the FAFSA that says, have you or at any time after July 1, 2020, were you determined to be an unaccompanied youth who is homeless or were self-supporting or at the risk of being homeless, as determined by your high school or district homeless liaison, the director of an emergency shelter or transitional housing program funded by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or the director of a runaway or homeless youth transitional living program. There won't be any additional verification required unless some contradictory information arises. So when you have a student who is at risk for being homeless or is an unaccompanied youth, this is something that they've added a few years ago to help those students receive aid. It gives them the benefit of not having to reach out to parents with whom they may not have a good relationship, so that they can move on with their education. Michael is a rising junior in high school in the 22-23 academic year, and he plans to graduate in May of 23. When he completes his FAFSA for fall 24. The years here got kind of mixed up, and I'm the one who did that, so I must have not been paying too much attention. And when he completes his FAFSA for attendance at Durham Tech Community College, which tax year will he and his parents need to use? Okay, so if he's graduating high school in 22-23 and will be attending in 23-24, they would use the 21 taxes. The best way to remember this for me, since they moved to prior year, is when you look at your academic year, like the 22-23 academic year, you need to use a tax year 2 years back. So 22 minus 2 is 2020. So whatever your start of your academic year is, if that's an even number, the year taxes is always going to be even as well. If they are using the IRS data retrieval tool, they won't have to decide which academic year or which tax year to use. It will be automatic. Okay, so Michael should use his 2020 tax information as 2020 is the prior year for his 2022 admission date. Elsa is a 22-year-old mother of baby-to-be Dora. Just moved in with into her brand new home. Although Elsa has been fully supporting herself for the past 2 years, the surprise announcement of her baby girl due in July 21 caused her parents to contribute financially. In fact, they will be paying for Elsa's monthly mortgage payment, child care for Dora, and groceries for both of them. When Elsa completes the FAFSA, will she be considered a dependent or independent student, and why? Elsa would still be considered a dependent student since her parents plan to support the child by more than 50%. She'll need to provide her parents' financial information for the FAFSA. If Elsa was planning to support the baby more than 50%, and since the baby is due after July 1 of 2021, she would have been considered independent. Trevor is originally from Hoke County. And he's been attending Sandhills Community College and plans to transfer to UNC Greensboro. He's applied for the 2-year Golden Leaf Scholarship and was awarded the maximum scholarship amount for the community colleges. What is the full amount per term he's receiving? When he transfers to UNC Greensboro, will he still be eligible to get Golden Leaf? And if so, how much would he receive at UNC Greensboro? So the maximum eligible amount at the community college is $750 per term, a maximum annually of $1,500. When Trevor transfers to UNC Greensboro, his Golden Leaf Scholarship will not automatically transfer with him. He must reapply for the four-year award. If he's selected as a recipient at UNC Greensboro, he'll be eligible for $1,500 per semester, or $3,000 annually for up to 3 years, depending on the number of credit hours he transfers. Janae and her family have moved from Colorado 6 months ago and are stationed at Fort Bragg in Fayetteville. As an active military member, Janae qualifies for in-state tuition and fees through the military tuition benefit, even though she and her family are still considered non-residents. Can her oldest son, Marcus, who's 23 years old, also qualify for in-state tuition when he attends Fayetteville State University in the fall? Can either Janae or Marcus qualify for state funding through NCSEAA? And why or why not? Okay, so Marcus will be eligible for in-state tuition rate, even though he's not yet considered a North Carolina resident. However, even though Janae and Marcus qualify for the in-state tuition rates due to Janae's active military participation, neither of them will be eligible for the state funding through the NCSEAA. NCSEAA funding is specifically reserved for official residents of North Carolina. Amy has completed her FAFSA for Western Carolina University and recently received her estimated financial aid package. It includes $3,500 in subsidized loan and $2,000 in unsubsidized loan. There is an institutional grant for $13,800 She brings you the award letter and asks you for a detailed explanation of what it means. And here is what you would explain. You'd explain that an estimated package means it's not yet finalized. There's no guarantee that her estimated funding will be the same as the actual funding amount. Typically, there must be some items that she has not yet completed. And Western Carolina University is likely waiting on these items before they can finalize her package. This is most common with verification, where students and parents need to turn in additional tax transcripts and worksheets. You also explain the difference between a subsidized and an unsubsidized loan, as well as the fact that those are loans and that's money that she's going to have to pay back. The subsidized loan won't accrue interest while Amy is in school, whereas this unsubsidized loan does accrue interest while she's in school. The institutional grant is a need-based grant from the college or the university, and need-based grants are often referred to as gift aid, since they're essentially free money that never has to be repaid. Maya submits her FAFSA in mid-February as instructed by Elon University's website. Since she completes her FAFSA before their priority deadline, she receives her financial aid package 2 weeks later. At the time of her submission, both of her parents were employed. Unfortunately, her father loses his job in June, which significantly reduces the amount of parental income. Maya is worried that she will no longer be able to afford Elon University, and she voices her concerns to you. So what you would do is advise her not to make changes to her FAFSA since she's already received her financial aid package. Instead, Maya should contact the financial aid office immediately to notify them about the change in her circumstances. Financial aid offices are allowed to reassess the student's expected family contribution when there's been a particular hardship or special circumstance, specifically related to divorce, separation, job loss, death, and/or a natural disaster. Financial aid offices refer to this as professional judgment. Maya may need to include appropriate documentation regarding her father's job loss, but Elon's financial aid office will instruct her on what she should do and how to submit them. So professional judgment is going to vary from school to school. If a student could be approved for professional judgment at one school and not for another, depending on how they all calculate it, because it is a professional judgment, it's not highly regulated how the changes would take effect. Taylor plans to attend Davidson College and has applied for regular decision. The institution lists their priority deadline for FAFSA and CSS Profile as February 16th. Unfortunately, Taylor completely forgets to submit her FAFSA and CSS Profile by this deadline, and she doesn't remember until mid-April. She rushes into your office wide-eyed and panicked, and she wants to know what will happen now that she's missed the deadline. What would you tell her? Even though the institution's priority deadline has already passed, Taylor can still submit her FAFSA and her CSS Profile. Her aid award would contain a loan component, as Davidson is only able to offer its no loan awards to on-time aid applicants. To avoid a future award of a loan component, Taylor needs to remember to submit her aid application forms on time. Lynn was a part of the North Carolina foster system since she was 5 years old. Now that she's turned 18, she is aged out of the foster care system. She plans to attend college for the first time at Elizabeth City State University, and she's completing her FAFSA. What will her dependency status be and why? What kind of state funding could she potentially be eligible for, if any? Why or why not? So Lynn is going to be classified as an independent student, specifically because she was in foster care after she turned 13. Lynn is automatically qualified as an independent student because she can answer yes to the foster care portion of that question. Lynn will be eligible for the NC Reach, which was established in 2007 as a child welfare post-secondary student support program. Lynn would qualify for this if she applies because she has aged out of the state foster care system. She is 18 years old. She will be enrolling in a UNC school system. Since she's attending college for the first time, she also is not in default and does not owe any type of refund for any federal or state loan or grant program. NC Reach will provide Lynn with assistance up to the cost of attendance in combination with her other scholarships and grants. Okay, so because she's a first-time attendee, that means she doesn't owe any federal or state overpayments. She was in the foster care system, and she's attending a UNC system school. She can also get this at the community colleges. It is not available in the private sector. So if she's attending a private institution in North Carolina, this would not be available for her. Okay, and I will be happy to take some questions.
So one question that we have, Katrina, is can you go over what a no loan aid award is?
What? Oh, could you say that again, please?
Sure. The question is, what is a no loan aid award?
Okay, so some of your institutions try to award enough aid so that the student, their cost is covered without having to take loans. Okay, so Davidson, for their early acceptances, it looks like, and for people who meet their priority deadline, when they create their financial aid package, they meet their need without awarding a loan. Okay, so the subsidized and unsubsidized loans would not automatically be on that student's award package. The student would have to specifically request it. Some schools will, a lot of your community colleges don't do student loans at all. So their award packages too would be a no loan award package.
Thank you.
Does that address the?
It does. Thank you so much. We have some more questions coming in. Another question is, what do you tell a student whose parent gets paid under the table and does not file taxes? How should they proceed with completing the FAFSA?
That one is always really hard for me personally, because when they file the FAFSA, they are asking for taxpayer dollars to assist them with their education, yet their parent is not a taxpayer, and they could be. All right, so I'm trying to think how best to answer this question. A lot of times, the situations that you have where this is happening is when they are non-citizens. Okay, I would still file it just like it was described in the FAFSA or in this presentation. Do the all zeros and put in the amount that was earned. Okay, and chances are they're not doing taxes, so you wouldn't have to worry about that part anyway. And as a financial aid administrator, if I know someone is not filing taxes, I have to advise them that they have to go ahead and file the taxes. So if it were to come to my desk like that, I would say, okay, well, you're going to need to file taxes before I can help you. We're happy to do a FAFSA for you, to help you with the FAFSA and award your aid, but before you do that, we're going to have you file the taxes. That's the only way I would know to proceed, because it is a federal requirement.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question we've gotten is a pretty common question, but I think it's a wonderful question for the group. So parents that are refusing to give their information, their social security numbers or any tax information, what do you suggest that folks do to help the student in this case?
Okay, so this depends on the reason the parent isn't providing the information. If the parent isn't providing the information because they don't want the student to see the information, then just have the parent do their part separately. The student won't see their information. And if they're doing it for some other reason because they think that child should be self-sufficient, they don't agree with the child going to school, something like that, then I recommend that they file it without the parental information. And then they would need to reach out to the institution where they're going to be attending. We can't do a dependency override in this situation because there is a relationship. However, we can mark that FAFSA so that the student would still be eligible for unsubsidized loans. If the student is going to a school that has loans, There have been instances where in a past life before I got to the community college, we would do a manual calculation of the EFC based on the information that was provided. And then we could determine what the student's need was so that we could determine institutional aid that we could award them. So there are still options for students like that. However, depending on their academic standing, it may be harder for them to be able to afford your higher level, the more expensive schools. They may still be able to afford some of the other schools.
Let's see. I've got a couple of questions about the REACH scholarship. So is the REACH scholarship available to students who are classified as McKinney-Vento? And are there others available to students who are homeless?
And no, the REACH, they specifically do have to have been in the foster care system. That's going to be what qualifies them for that, is being in the foster care system.
All the questions are coming in, Katrina. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, the next question that I see. What about a business owner that did not file personal income taxes? Will they need to file personal taxes for the previous 2 years? I'm assuming prior to filling out the FAFSA or being able to complete the FAFSA.
Okay, so their personal taxes will have to be filed for the year that they need for the FAFSA. Okay, so like right now, the people who are doing the 22-23 FAFSA. So the people doing the 22-23 FAFSA, their 20 taxes would have to be done before they could file the 23-24 taxes. Their 20 or FAFSA, their 21 taxes would have to be done. So we are not going to look and see in 22-23 were your 21 taxes done. We're only going to see your 20 taxes were done. One change to that could be if someone is looking for special circumstances. Very common right now, people lost employment because of COVID, so their finances aren't the same as they were in 2020. Okay, so maybe 2021 is more indicative of what their real financial situation is. And at that point, we would have to have 21 taxes. But this is a professional judgment. And remember, I said each school could do it different and come up with a different answer. And one of the reasons is that the school will pick which 12-month period to use to recalculate that student's EFC. So some schools may say, okay, if 20 wasn't indicative, 2021 was. Some may go as far as to say, okay, project your financial information over this time frame from June 30 or July 1 to June 30 of the actual school year that the student's going to be attending. So you're going to see some fluctuation there. But it could require, if they're using 21, that your 21 taxes be done.
The next question is, how do I advise a student whose parents filed separately, yet they are married?
Okay, so this student will not be able to use the IRS data retrieval tool. So what they should do when they're completing the FAFSA, whether the parent is completing the parent portion or the student is take the income from both parents, and for all the tax questions on the FAFSA, add the answers from the two parents together. The one exception is where it asks for parent one's income earned from work. You would just put parent one's income earned from work on that one, and then parent two, you would just put parent two. You don't want to add those together when you're entering that. But for your AGI and your taxes paid, all of those types of questions, you're going to have to not use the data retrieval tool and answer them by adding those two together.
Just a few more questions. Thank you again, Katrina, and thank you to all of our participants, all of our counselors and college advisors that are with us for all these wonderful questions. The next question is, what about a student that lives with a parent and a step significant other of over 7 years, but they've never married? I guess the question is how do they address that even though they are not legally married?
Okay, so if two biological parents live together and were never married, you're required to use both of them. If they haven't married, you are not required to use both of them. So you would just use the natural parent.
The next one is a scenario, so let me know if you need me to read it again.
Okay.
There's a student who lives in North Carolina with their biological father, and the biological mother lives out of the country and is not married. The father does not claim on taxes. Does the student need to use his father's information, and will they need to use the mother's and convert it to US dollars?
Okay, did I understand that the parents are not married?
Yes.
Okay, so the parents aren't married in this situation. The student, if the student is dependent, then yes, he would use his father's information. And so there are 11, I think, dependency questions on the FAFSA. If he cannot answer yes to any of those questions, then he would use his father's information. I'm trying to think, if he's still in high school, then most likely scenario would be as if he's supporting a child. And even then, that's not really likely. So in most cases in that situation, yes, he would include his father's information, but not the mother's.
Let's see, I have two more questions. This one says a student listed her father as the primary parent, and the father is not married to the biological mother, and because he claims her as a dependent, so that's why the student listed her father as a primary parent. The school is requesting her mother's info for her CSS. Will this impact her aid or her FAFSA?
And so it won't impact her FAFSA, but if she's doing that CSS profile, it could affect her institutional aid. So there are 5 institutions in North Carolina, I believe. I can't name them, but I believe there are 5 that use the CSS profile. So when you fill that out, they're looking at more in-depth information than the FAFSA is. So if your parents aren't living together or they're divorced, or perhaps they were never married, but it will look at both biological parents' information. The FAFSA remains as it is with just the supporting parent. And then so the federal and the state aid would remain the same, but the institutional need-based aid could be altered by what's on the CSS.
Thank you. And the very last question that I see, how would you advise a student that lives with their parent, but it is the student's residence that they pay for, and the student is supporting their parent?
Okay, so if the student is supporting the parent and they can document that that is what's happening, then when the student is responding to the questions about dependents other than children, they would answer that one yes, independent. And that would mean that they would not have to include the parental information on the FAFSA. I can tell you that as a financial aid administrator, an 18-year-old who is supporting someone other than children will raise a flag, and we may look at that and say, okay, well, we'd like to see how this is happening, especially if they've been in high school, attending school 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. How are they earning enough to do that?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That is the last question that I see. I know I have some other colleagues on the line. If you all see a question that I missed, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Hey, Nicole, this is Catherine. I
All right.
have answered a few questions while Katrina was explaining the really complicated things. I put some links in the chat. One of the questions has been a couple of times is about just getting some help. And so I just posted a link that goes to cfnc.org, and I want to encourage everybody to check it out because it links to local resources as well as call centers that are manned, Monday through Saturday. The federal government has call centers to answer questions, but one of those links for local help is a map of North Carolina with um, clicks for the institutions across the state. So if you click on one of the points on that map, you'll access the phone number and hours for help at a financial aid office near you. So no matter where you are, you can get a hold of a financial aid office in your community. Probably a really good first step when something complicated is going on. So I just wanted to make sure everybody realized that how easy that was to find those phone numbers.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and
Yes.
I'll reiterate that if I could. I've worked at 2 different institutions, and I know either one of them would help anyone who walked in the door with a FAFSA. It doesn't matter where they plan to attend. We would help them get that FAFSA done, whether it is a FAFSA event or it's just a Wednesday and they happen to walk in. So always check to see if your local schools aren't willing to help you with that. And we're also available to come out and do high school nights if you want us to come out and help your students get FAFSAs filed.
That's wonderful. That's such a wonderful and helpful resource. Thank you so much, both Catherine and Katrina. I really, really appreciate that. And again, appreciate all the attendees here. You all had some phenomenal questions. I shared this in the chat and answered some individual questions, but I will be sending this presentation out this afternoon to all those who've attended, just so you can review the PowerPoint and everything that Katrina has said. It'll be super helpful in the future. I also wanted to plug in that we have some additional sessions coming up this week, all week. On Tuesday, we have the new CFNC Pro Tool session, and I can send this out as well with this presentation. On Wednesday, we have a presentation about the 22-23 FAFSA changes and updates. On Thursday, we have a CFNC update, and on Friday, we will have a presentation about Finish the FAFSA and my Future NC FAFSA tracker. And so we encourage you all to please come and get some really helpful information from some wonderful colleagues of mine. So again, thank you so much, Katrina, and to all the attendees. We can't wait to see and hear from you soon. Have a wonderful day, everyone.